Welcome to my channel, a vlog that brings your story about the love of a mafia boss. Now let's listen.
The silk of my ugliest dress whispered against my legs as I descended the marble staircase of my father's estate. Each step felt like a small victory, a quiet rebellion against the fate he'd decided for me without consultation, without consideration for the 26 years I'd spent proving myself worthy of inheriting the Moretti Empire. The dress was truly hideous, a mustard yellow that clashed violently with my olive skin tone, with ruffles that added bulk where I needed none, and a neckline that somehow managed to be both too high and unflattering. I'd found it in the back of my closet, a relic from a cousin's wedding 5 years ago, and knew immediately it was perfect for tonight's purpose. Brielle. My father's voice stopped me 3 steps from the bottom. Domenico Moretti stood in the doorway of his study, his silver-streaked dark hair impeccably styled, his Armani suit fitting his still powerful frame with the precision only custom tailoring could achieve. But it was his eyes, dark brown, almost black, and currently filled with barely controlled fury, that made me pause. "Father," I replied, my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart. I'd learned long ago never to show weakness in front of him. Weakness was death in our world. "What?" he said, each word precisely enunciated. "Are you wearing?" I smoothed down the ruffled monstrosity with deliberate care. "A dress? Isn't that what one wears to meet a potential husband?" The word dripped with sarcasm I didn't bother to hide. His jaw tightened, that telltale muscle in his cheek jumping the way it always did when I pushed too far. "You will go upstairs and change into something appropriate. The Caruso family will be here in 20 minutes. "The Caruso family," I repeated, tasting the name. My father had refused to tell me anything about my arranged fiancé, except that the marriage would unite 2 of the most powerful families in the Eastern Territories. No name, no background, just the expectation that I would comply like a good little mafia princess. Except I wasn't good, and I'd spent my entire life proving I was more than just a princess. "You have 15 minutes, my father said, turning back toward his study. "Do not embarrass me, Brielle. This alliance is too important. More important than the fact that I've run your money laundering operations for 3 years without a single mistake?" The words burst out before I could stop them. "More important than the deals I've negotiated, the connections I've built, the respect I've earned?" He paused, his back still to me. "Those things make you valuable as a daughter and as a future wife to a powerful man. They do not make you suitable to lead this family." The dismissal was absolute, final, and it hurt more than I wanted to admit. "Why?" I demanded, descending the final steps to stand in the marble foyer that had been my playground as a child. "Because I'm a woman? Because I had the misfortune of being born with ovaries instead of—" "Because this world requires certain alliances," he interrupted, finally turning to face me. "And marriage to Vitor Caruso secures our Eastern Territory, eliminates a rival, and positions us to expand into markets we've been locked out of for a decade. Your skills will be valuable in that marriage, Brielle, just not in the way you imagined." Vitor Caruso. Finally, a name. I committed it to memory, already planning to have my contact at the FBI pull whatever files existed on him. "I won't change," I said, gesturing to the dress. "If this Vitor Caruso is going to be my husband, he should see exactly what he's getting. No pretense. No performance." My father's expression could have frozen hell. "You will—" The doorbell's chime cut through his threat. We both turned toward the massive oak doors that led to the circular driveway where our security team was undoubtedly vetting our guests. "Too late," I said, unable to keep the satisfaction from my voice. "I guess Vitor Caruso will have to accept me as I am." My father's hand shot out, gripping my arm with barely controlled violence. "You will be respectful. You will be gracious. And you will accept this engagement, Brielle, or I will cut you off from the family entirely. No money, no protection, no name. Do you understand? The threat was real. I saw it in his eyes, in the set of his shoulders. My father was a man who kept his promises, especially when it came to maintaining his empire's strength. Crystal clear, I whispered. He released me, smoothing down his jacket as Marco, our head of security, opened the doors. The man who entered first was older, perhaps 60, with the kind of presence that commanded immediate respect. His suit was even more expensive than my father's, his salt and pepper hair swept back from a face that had seen decades of hard decisions. This had to be the elder Caruso, but it was the man behind him who stole my breath. Tall, at least 6'3", with broad shoulders that filled out his charcoal suit with devastating effect. Dark hair styled with casual precision, strong features that looked carved from marble, and eyes. No. Those eyes. Storm gray with flecks of blue that I'd memorized during long dinners at neutral restaurants. Eyes that had looked at me with interest and warmth and something that had felt thrillingly like possibility. Bruno. Except his name wasn't Bruno. Domenico, the older man said, extending his hand to my father. Thank you for having us. Antonio, my father replied, and I realized this wasn't Vito Caruso at all, but his father, which meant, my son, Viter, Antonio said, gesturing to the man I'd known as Bruno. Our eyes met across the foyer, and I watched recognition dawn in those gray depths. Watched his expression shift from polite interest to shock, to something colder, more calculating. He'd known. The realization hit me like a physical blow. All those dinners over the past 3 months, all those conversations where I'd carefully avoided mentioning my father's business, where Bruno had presented himself as a simple tech CEO looking to expand into new markets. Every laugh, every shared glance, every moment where I'd thought maybe, just maybe, I could have something normal, something mine. All lies. Brielle, my father said, his voice tight with barely concealed anger at my appearance. This is Antonio Caruso and his son, Viter, your fiancé. The word fiancé hung in the air between us, weighted with all the implications neither of us had known 3 hours ago when I'd made the decision to wear this ridiculous dress. Viter's, not Bruno, never Bruno again. Expression was unreadable as he stepped forward, extending his hand. Miss Moretti, it's a pleasure to finally meet you officially. Finally, as if we hadn't shared pasta carbonara last week at that little place in Chelsea, as if he hadn't told me about his mother's death when he was 12, his father's expectations, his dreams of building something legitimate. All lies. My hand met his, and the familiar warmth of his touch sent rage and betrayal coursing through me in equal measure. Mr. Caruso, I said, my voice ice. How wonderful to meet the man my father has chosen for me without any consultation whatsoever. I saw my father stiffen, saw Antonio Caruso's eyebrows rise slightly, but Viter's expression didn't change. He simply held my hand a moment longer than necessary before releasing it. That dress, he said, his voice low and dangerous, is truly memorable. The insult was delivered with perfect politeness, but we both knew what he was saying. I'd insulted him with my appearance, and he was returning the favor. I'm so glad you like it, I replied with a sweet smile that didn't reach my eyes. I wore it especially for this occasion. I wanted to make sure you saw exactly what you'd be getting. Oh, I see, he said, and something in his tone made my skin prickle with awareness. I see very clearly. Perhaps, Antonio interjected smoothly, we should move to the dining room. I'm sure you've prepared something wonderful, Domenico. My father nodded, already moving toward the formal dining room where I knew our chef had prepared a 7-course meal designed to impress. But as I moved to follow, Vider's hand caught my elbow, his grip gentle but unmistakable. "A word," he said quietly. "In private." My father turned, clearly about to object, but Antonio placed a hand on his shoulder. "Let the young people talk, Domenico. They should get to know each other." It wasn't a suggestion. Vider guided me toward the library, his hand still on my elbow, his touch burning through the ugly yellow fabric. The moment we were inside, with the heavy oak door closed behind us, I yanked my arm free. "Don't touch me," I hissed. "Brielle! That's not even my real name to you, is it?" I advanced on him, all the rage and betrayal I'd been holding back exploding outward. What was I? Research? A way to learn about the enemy before the engagement was announced? Did you laugh about it? About how easy I was? How readily I believed your lies? His jaw tightened. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Bruno? I spat his fake name like a curse. Enlighten me. Explain how a man spends 3 months building something with a woman, making her think maybe she could have one thing in her life that wasn't calculated and controlled, and then shows up as her arranged fucking fiancé. "I didn't know it was you," he said, his voice hard. "Not at first. When we met at that charity dinner, when I introduced myself as Bruno Marchetti, I was there because my father wanted me to scope out Moretti's financial operations. You weren't supposed to be there. You were supposed to be in Milan." "I came back early," I said, the memory of that night flooding back. I'd been so tired of my father's expectations, of the constant pressure to prove myself. I'd gone to that dinner to make connections of my own, to build relationships outside my father's shadow. And I'd met Bruno, Vider, and for the first time in years I'd felt seen. "I know," he continued, "and when you told me your name was Ella Carter, that you worked in financial consulting, I believed you, just like you believed me." The admission hung between us. We'd both lied, both hidden our true identities, but his lie felt bigger, more calculated. "When did you know?" I demanded. 2 weeks ago. My father announced the engagement, showed me your photo, and I realized that Ella Carter, the brilliant financial consultant I'd been seeing, was actually Brielle Moretti, the daughter of my family's oldest rival and my newly arranged fiancé. "You could have told me," I said, hating the hurt that crept into my voice. "You could have called, explained, given me some warning." "And you would have done what?" he challenged. "Run. Refused the engagement." "We both know that's not how this works, Brielle. Our fathers made this deal. We're the price of peace between our families." He was right, and I hated that he was right. "I won't marry you," I said, though the words felt hollow. "I'll refuse. You'll comply," Vider interrupted, his voice going cold. "Just like I will, because that's what people like us do. We sacrifice our wants for the family's needs." "People like us," I repeated bitterly. "You mean pawns." "I mean leaders who understand that sometimes the greatest act of power is accepting what we cannot change." He moved closer, and I caught his scent, the same cologne he'd worn as Bruno, woody and expensive and achingly familiar. "But let me be clear about something, Brielle. I'm not happy about this arrangement either. I thought I'd found something real with you, something that wasn't tainted by family obligations and political maneuvering. Finding out you're my arranged bride didn't fill me with joy. The confession should have softened me. Instead, it made me angrier." "Then we're agreed," I said, lifting my chin. "This marriage will be exactly what our fathers want, a political alliance, nothing more. You'll get your territory and your peace treaty. I'll get to keep my family name and connections. But don't expect me to play the devoted wife. Don't expect warmth or affection or anything beyond what's required for public appearances." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "Is that a challenge, Brielle?" "It's a promise, Vider." We stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills. The chemistry that had drawn us together as Bruno and Ella now crackling with hostility and betrayal instead of attraction. "We should get back to dinner," he said finally, "before our fathers send security to check on us." I moved toward the door, but his voice stopped me. "Brielle." I didn't turn around. That dress really is hideous. Despite everything, despite the rage and hurt and betrayal, I felt my lips twitch. "I know. I wore it to make you reject me." I figured. There was something almost like amusement in his voice. It didn't work. Clearly. I finally looked back at him. This man who'd been Bruno and was now Vitor. This stranger I'd thought I'd known. "This doesn't mean I forgive you, or that I'm going to make any of this easy." His smile was slow, predatory. "Good. I wouldn't want an easy wife, Brielle. Where would be the fun in that?" The word wife sent a shiver down my spine. Half dread and half something I refused to examine too closely. As we walked back to the dining room, maintaining a careful distance between us, I realized that my plan to sabotage this engagement had spectacularly backfired. I hadn't driven Vitor Caruso away. I'd merely shown him exactly how stubborn and defiant I could be. And from the way he was looking at me, with that mixture of calculation and heat, I suspected he was already planning how to break through my defenses. The game had begun, and I had no intention of losing. The engagement party was scheduled for the following Saturday, giving me exactly 5 days to figure out how to escape a fate that seemed increasingly inevitable. I spent those days exactly as I always had, managing the financial operations of my father's empire, meeting with lawyers and accountants, reviewing contracts and ensuring that money moved through our legitimate businesses with the perfect balance of transparency and discretion. The difference was that now, everywhere I went, I felt watched. It started small. A black SUV that appeared in my rearview mirror on my drive to the office. The same man in a dark suit nursing a coffee at the cafe across from our building. A text from an unknown number simply saying, "The blue dress, wear the blue dress." I knew who was behind it. Vitor wasn't just watching me. He was making sure I knew I was being watched. "You look tired," Isabella said, setting a triple espresso on my desk. My assistant had been with me for 2 years, pulled from the typing pool when I'd noticed her keen eye for discrepancies in accounting. She was brilliant, loyal, and one of the few people in the organization who treated me like more than just the boss's daughter. "I'm fine," I lied, signing off on a wire transfer that would move $3 million through a series of shell corporations before landing in an account in the Caymans. Perfectly legal, perfectly clean, and perfectly designed to avoid the kind of scrutiny that could bring down empires. "Is it the engagement?" Isabella asked carefully. I heard rumors. Everyone had heard rumors. The news that Domenico Moretti's only daughter was marrying Vitor Caruso had spread through the organization like wildfire. Some saw it as a brilliant strategic move. Others saw it as my father finally putting me in my place. "The engagement is fine," I said, though my jaw ached from grinding my teeth. "Everything is perfectly planned." My phone buzzed. Another unknown number. Another message. "The earrings your grandmother left you. Wear those too." I stared at the text, rage building in my chest. How did he know about my grandmother's earrings? They'd been her favorite, simple pearl drops that I kept in a safe in my apartment. I'd never worn them in public, never mentioned them to anyone, which meant Vitor had been investigating me long before that first dinner at the charity event. "I need to make a call," I told Isabella, waiting until she left before dialing the number that had sent the last text. He answered on the first ring. "Brielle." "Stop watching me," I said without preamble, "and stop sending me instructions like I'm some kind of doll you're dressing up for display." "The engagement party is in 3 days," Vitor replied, his voice calm and infuriatingly reasonable. "Our families expect us to present as a united front. That requires coordination." It requires you to stop stalking me. I prefer to think of it as ensuring my future wife's safety. I could hear the smile in his voice, could picture him leaning back in whatever expensive chair he occupied, completely in control. These are dangerous times, Brielle. You never know who might try to exploit a soon-to-be bride. The only person trying to exploit me is you. Not exploit, he corrected. Protect. There's a difference. Is there? I stood, pacing to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook the city. Because from where I'm standing, you're behaving exactly like every other controlling bastard who thinks women need to be managed. I don't think you need to be managed, Brielle. I know you're brilliant. I saw that firsthand when you were pretending to be Ella Carter, financial consultant. But you need to understand something about our new reality. And what's that? You're mine now. Which means anyone who wants to hurt me will come after you. The surveillance isn't about control. It's about making sure you live long enough to become my wife. The possessiveness in his voice sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't Bruno speaking, the man who'd respected my independence and admired my career. This was Vitor Caruso, mafia prince, and soon-to-be heir to an empire built on violence and control. I can take care of myself, I said. Against a rival family's hit squad? Against a cartel looking to send a message? Against the dozens of enemies both our families have accumulated over decades? He paused. You're smart, Brielle. Don't be stupid about this. Accept the protection and wear the blue dress. The line went dead before I could respond. I returned to my desk, pulling up the security feeds for our building. Sure enough, there were new faces in the lobby. 2 men in expensive suits trying to look casual as they monitored everyone who entered or left. Vitor's men, no doubt. My phone rang again, but this time it was a number I recognized. My father's personal line. Yes? I answered. My office. Now. The click of disconnection was final. I found him behind his massive mahogany desk, reviewing documents that I knew pertained to the merger of our family's operations with the Carusos. On paper, it looked like a series of legitimate business deals. In reality, it was the consolidation of 2 criminal empires into one virtually untouchable force. You've been causing problems, he said without looking up. I've been doing my job. Your job is to marry Vitor Caruso and secure this alliance. Nothing else matters. He finally raised his eyes to mine. Antonio called me this morning. Apparently you've been uncooperative about the engagement party arrangements. I've been busy managing the financial operations you never seem to remember I handle, I shot back. That will be Vitor's concern soon enough. He's more than capable of managing those operations. The casual dismissal of everything I'd built made my hands clench into fists. So that's it? After years of proving myself, I'm just supposed to hand everything over to my husband? You're supposed to support your husband, my father corrected. To be a partner to him in building something greater than either family alone could achieve. Your skills will be valuable in that partnership, Brielle. But make no mistake, Vitor will lead. That's non-negotiable. And if I refuse to marry him? My father's expression didn't change, but something cold entered his eyes. Then you leave this family with nothing. No money, no name, no protection. You think you can survive in this world alone? You think your skills as an accountant will matter when every family knows you've been disowned by the Morettis? He was right, and we both knew it. I'd spent my entire life in the shelter of my family's name and power. Without it, I'd be vulnerable, exposed, a target for anyone looking to send a message. I hate you for this, I whispered. You'll thank me someday, he replied, returning to his documents. When you're running an empire alongside your husband instead of working in the shadows of mine. Dismissed. I left his office with my heart pounding and my mind racing. There had to be a way out of this. There had to be some option I wasn't seeing. My phone buzzed again. A new message from Vitor's number. Meet me at Rossetti's. 8 p.m. Come alone. Rossetti's was a small Italian restaurant in Little Italy, family-owned and neutral territory. A place where business could be conducted without the weight of family estates and formal dining rooms. I should have ignored the message. Should have gone home, locked my doors, and spent the evening plotting my escape. Instead, I found myself driving to Little Italy at 7:45 p.m., pulling up to the familiar awning of Rossetti's and feeling a wave of déjà vu. This was where we'd had our second date, where Bruno had made me laugh with stories about his disastrous attempts at cooking, where I'd felt comfortable enough to share my frustrations about always having to prove myself in a male-dominated world. All lies. Vitor was waiting in a private room in the back, 2 glasses of wine already poured. He'd changed out of his suit into dark jeans and a black sweater that somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. "You came?" he said, standing as I entered. "I'm here to tell you to call off your surveillance," I replied, not taking the offered seat. "I don't need your protection or your instructions. Sit down, Brielle." It wasn't a request. I remained standing. "I'm not one of your soldiers to be ordered around." "No," he agreed, moving around the table with that fluid grace that reminded me of a predator. "You're my future wife, which means you're infinitely more valuable than any soldier. Now sit." The command in his voice made my spine stiffen, but I sat. Not because he'd ordered it, but because standing was starting to feel like the childish response. "The surveillance stops," I said as he returned to his seat. "No. Vitor. I wasn't lying about the danger, Brielle. Our engagement has already created ripples. There are families who don't want to see the Morettis and Carusos united. They'll try to stop this marriage, and the easiest way to do that is to eliminate one of us before the ceremony. Then eliminate me," I said coldly. "Problem solved. You can marry someone more amenable, and I can return to my life." His expression hardened. "That's not going to happen." "Why not? You said yourself you weren't happy about this arrangement." I said I wasn't happy about discovering that the woman I'd been seeing was my arranged bride. That doesn't mean I'm unhappy about marrying you. He leaned forward, his gray eyes intense. "You're brilliant, Brielle. You're strong, strategic, and completely unafraid to challenge me. Do you know how rare that is? How valuable?" "So I'm an asset," I said bitterly. "How romantic. You're everything I never knew I needed in a partner." The admission seemed to cost him something, and I'm not going to let anyone take that away from me. Not rival families, not your stubbornness, and certainly not your determination to make this as difficult as possible. "You lied to me," I said, the hurt I'd been suppressing finally breaking through. "You let me think you were someone you weren't. You let me develop feelings for Bruno when Bruno didn't even exist." "Bruno exists," Vitor said quietly. "He's the part of me that wanted something real, something not tainted by family obligations. He's the part that fell for a woman who challenged him and made him laugh and saw past the power to the person beneath." "Stop," I whispered, not wanting to hear this. "Brielle, no." I stood abruptly. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to use the connection we had against me. That was built on lies, Vitor. All of it." "Not all of it," he said, rising to face me. "The feelings were real. The conversations were real. The way I felt when I was with you, that was real. It doesn't matter." But even as I said it, I felt the truth of his words resonating in my chest. Because despite the betrayal, despite my rage, I couldn't deny that what we'd shared had felt more genuine than anything else in my carefully constructed life. "It matters more than anything," Vitor insisted, "because it means we have a foundation to build on. We're not starting from nothing, Brielle. We're starting from something that was already working before our families complicated it." "Our families didn't complicate it," I corrected. "They destroyed it. And now they're forcing us into a marriage neither of us truly wants. I want it." The simple declaration stunned me into silence. "I want to marry you, Brielle Moretti," he continued. "Not because our fathers arranged it, not because it benefits our families, but because I saw who you really are when you thought you were just Ella Carter. I saw your brilliance and your strength and your determination to build something meaningful. And I want that woman as my wife. I want that woman ruling beside me." "Ruling," I repeated. "You mean being a decorative piece in your empire?" "I mean leading," he corrected. "Being my equal partner in building something greater than either family alone could achieve. Your father might see you as a bargaining chip, Brielle, but I see you as a queen." The word settled over me like a mantle, heavy with responsibility and possibility. "I need time," I said finally. "Time to think about all of this without your surveillance and your instructions and your presence reminding me of every lie." "You have until the engagement party," he said. 3 more days. Use them to accept what's inevitable, or use them to keep fighting. Either way, Brielle, this marriage is happening. The only question is whether you walk into it as my adversary or my partner. I left Rossetti's with my mind churning and my heart conflicted. Part of me wanted to keep fighting, to rebel against the fate my father and Vitor had decided for me. But another part, the part that remembered Bruno's laugh and his respect for my intelligence, wondered if Vitor was right. Maybe we could build something together, something that honored who we'd been as Bruno and Ella, while accepting who we had to be as Vitor and Brielle. But first, I needed to know exactly what I was agreeing to, and that meant understanding the full scope of Vitor Caruso's empire and what it would mean to be his queen. I spent the next 2 days doing what I did best: research. My contacts at the FBI, carefully cultivated over years of managing my father's legal fronts, provided detailed files on the Caruso family operations. What I found both impressed and terrified me. Vitor Caruso wasn't just his father's heir. He'd been actively building his own network for the past decade, expanding into territories and markets that even my father hadn't penetrated. Tech companies in Silicon Valley that provided perfect cover for money laundering, shipping operations on both coasts, real estate holdings across 3 countries, and underneath it all, the traditional operations: protection, smuggling, strategic violence when necessary. He was brilliant, ruthless, and far more powerful than my father had probably realized when he'd agreed to this marriage. "You're playing with fire," Isabella said, handing me another espresso as I reviewed the final reports in my office. It was late, nearly midnight, and I'd sent everyone else home hours ago. "I know what I'm doing," I replied, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. "Do you?" She sat across from me, abandoning her usual professional distance. "Brielle, I've worked for you long enough to know when you're planning something. What are you thinking?" I looked at my assistant, my friend really, and made a decision. If I'm going to marry Vitor Caruso, I'm not going to be a decorative wife. I'm going to be an actual partner, which means I need leverage. Leverage against your own husband? Leverage to ensure he treats me as an equal. I pulled up a file I'd been compiling, a detailed analysis of inefficiencies in the Caruso operations, places where my financial expertise could dramatically improve their bottom line. I'm going to show him exactly what I bring to this marriage beyond my father's alliance. Isabella studied the document, her eyes widening. "This is brilliant. But Brielle, you're essentially offering to help him build an even more powerful criminal enterprise." I know. The admission felt heavy. I'd spent years justifying my work for my father as helping manage legitimate business operations, but the Caruso files made it clear there was nothing ambiguous about Vitor's empire. But if I'm going to be part of this world anyway, I might as well be the best at it. My phone buzzed. A text from Vitor. "Tomorrow, 2 p.m., the estate. We need to talk before the party." "I should go home," I said, gathering my files. "Get some sleep before whatever confrontation he has planned." "Brielle," Isabella called as I reached the door. "For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. Not the easy one, but the right one. I wished I felt as certain. The Caruso estate was different from my father's. Where the Moretti compound was all old-world elegance and Italian marble, the Caruso property was modern, all glass and steel and clean lines that spoke of power without needing to prove it. The guard at the gate was expecting me, waving me through without even asking for identification. More evidence of Vider's surveillance. He'd known I'd come. A woman met me at the front door, early 60s, with the kind of severe elegance that spoke of decades managing a household. Miss Moretti, Mr. Caruso is waiting in his private study. Follow me. We walked through rooms filled with contemporary art and minimalist furniture, until she stopped at a heavy door at the end of a long corridor. He asked not to be disturbed, she said, knocking once before opening the door and stepping aside. Vider's study was lined with books. Actual books, not the decorative kind some men kept for show. Financial texts, histories of empires both legitimate and criminal, biographies of powerful men and women who'd shaped the world through force of will. He stood by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a garden that somehow managed to look both manicured and wild, dressed in dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. It was the most casual I'd ever seen him, and somehow it made him more intimidating, not less. You came, he said, without turning around. You summoned, I replied, though I'm here of my own accord, not because you ordered it. Of course. He finally faced me, and I saw shadows under his eyes that matched my own. I wanted to talk before tomorrow's party, before we're forced to perform for our families. Talk then. He gestured to a leather chair near his desk, taking the one opposite rather than sitting behind the desk in a power position. I've been thinking about what you said at Rossetti's, about wanting to be more than a decorative piece. And I want to make you an offer, a real partnership in managing our combined operations. He pulled out a folder, much thinner than the files I'd compiled but equally detailed. I've reviewed your work on your father's financial operations. You've saved him millions in taxes and investigations. Your shell company structures are elegant. Your money movement is virtually untraceable. You're wasted managing just the Moretti finances. Despite myself, I felt a flush of pride. What exactly are you proposing? Full access to Caruso operations, a seat at every strategy meeting, equal say in how we expand and where we invest. He leaned forward. I meant what I said, Brielle. I want you as my queen, not my prisoner. But that requires trust on both sides. I opened my briefcase, pulling out my own analysis. Then let's start building that trust. I've identified 17 inefficiencies in your current operations. Implementation of my recommendations would increase your annual revenue by approximately 32%, while reducing your risk of federal investigation by nearly half. Vider's eyebrows rose as he took the document, scanning the first few pages. I watched his expression shift from surprise to respect to something that looked almost like hunger. You did this in 2 days? I've had access to FBI files on your family for years, I admitted. I just never had a reason to do anything with them until now. And now? Now I'm deciding whether to burn your empire to the ground or help you build it into something unstoppable. I met his gaze steadily. The choice is yours, Vider. You can treat me like a trophy wife and wonder every day whether I'm going to destroy you from the inside. Or you can make me a real partner and benefit from everything I can offer. He set down the document carefully. That sounds like a threat. It's a negotiation. I pulled out another file, this one much thinner. This contains evidence of 3 illegal operations you're running that could bring federal charges, operations your father doesn't even know about. I'm offering you 2 choices. 1, we become real partners, and this file gets destroyed. 2, we maintain the fiction of our arranged marriage. and I keep this as insurance against you ever trying to control or diminish me." "Insurance," he repeated. "Or blackmail. Call it what you want. I call it self-preservation." For a long moment, he simply looked at me. Then slowly, deliberately, he stood and moved to his desk, pulling out a lighter from the drawer. "Give me the file. Vidor, give it to me, Brielle." Warily, I handed it over. He opened it, glanced at the contents, evidence I'd spent considerable resources gathering, and then held the lighter to the corner. We both watched as the pages caught fire, as my insurance went up in flames. "What are you doing?" I demanded. He dropped the burning file into a metal trash can, watching until it was nothing but ash. Then he turned to me with an intensity that stole my breath. "I'm showing you that I meant what I said. I want a real partnership. That requires trust. And trust means I'm not going to give you reasons to need blackmail material." He moved closer. "I'm not your father, Brielle. I'm not going to diminish your abilities or sideline your intelligence. I'm going to use every skill you have to build something unprecedented. And if you change your mind, then you'll use your brilliant mind to destroy me, and I'll deserve it." He was close now, close enough that I could see the blue flecks in his gray eyes, could smell his cologne. "But I'm not going to change my mind, because unlike your father, I know exactly what I'm getting. A partner who challenges me, who makes me better, who could rule this empire with or without me, but chooses to do it with me." "I haven't chosen anything yet," I said, though my heart was pounding. "Haven't you?" His hand came up to trace my jawline, the touch achingly familiar from our Bruno and Ella days. "You could have walked away, could have refused this marriage and taken your chances. But you're here, Brielle. You're here negotiating terms instead of running. That's a choice." He was right, and I hated that he was right. "I'm staying because I refuse to be defeated by my father's machinations," I said. "Not because I want this." Liar. But he smiled as he said it. "You want this as much as I do. You're just too stubborn to admit it." Before I could argue, he kissed me. Not the gentle explorations from our Bruno and Ella days, but something claiming and possessive that took my breath and my resistance with it. I should have pushed him away, should have maintained my distance. Instead, I kissed him back, pouring all my rage and betrayal and confused desire into it. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "Partners?" he asked. "Partners," I agreed. "But Vider, if you ever lie to me again, if you ever try to diminish me or control me the way my father has, I will destroy you. I don't need blackmail files to do that." "I believe you." He pressed another kiss to my forehead. "God help me. I believe you. And I wouldn't have it any other way." The engagement party the next evening was everything I'd expected. Ostentatious, politically charged, and carefully choreographed to announce to every family in the Eastern Territories that the Morettis and Carusos were now united. I wore the blue dress Vider had requested, the one that had arrived at my apartment that morning with a note, "For my queen." It was stunning. Deep sapphire silk that made my dark hair and eyes stand out, with a neckline that was elegant rather than revealing, and a fit that spoke of custom tailoring. The kind of dress a woman wore when she wanted to be taken seriously, not just admired. The pearl earrings from my grandmother completed the look. "You're beautiful," Vider said when I arrived, offering his arm with old-world courtesy that somehow didn't feel patronizing. "Ready to convince everyone we're madly in love?" "Ready to convince them we're a force to be reckoned with," I corrected. His smile was slow and dangerous. Even better. The party was held at a neutral venue, a historic hotel that had hosted these kinds of events for generations. As we entered the ballroom, I felt every eye turn to assess us. The new power couple. the alliance that would reshape the Eastern territories. "Smile," Vitor murmured. "Let them see a united front." I smiled, playing my part perfectly as we circulated through the crowd, making small talk with family heads and their wives, accepting congratulations that felt more like assessments, demonstrating with every word and gesture that Brielle Moretti was not just becoming Mrs. Caruso. She was becoming a force in her own right. "Well played," my father said when he finally approached us. "You look the part, Brielle." "I am the part," I corrected, keeping my voice light for the benefit of onlookers. "Or did you think I'd embarrass you by wearing mustard yellow again?" Something almost like respect flickered in his eyes. "Vitor is a lucky man." "I know," Vitor replied, his arm tightening around my waist. "Believe me, Domenico, I know exactly how fortunate I am." The evening continued in a blur of champagne and carefully coded conversations. But as I stood there, playing the role of devoted fiancé, while negotiating territorial agreements and financial arrangements with the skill I'd honed over years, I realized something. I wasn't playing a role. I was becoming exactly what Vitor had called me, a queen. And for the first time since my father had announced this engagement, I felt something other than rage or resignation. I felt power. The wedding was scheduled for 3 months after the engagement party, giving just enough time to plan something appropriately impressive while not so long that anyone could interfere. I threw myself into preparations with the same intensity I brought to everything else. Not because I was excited about marrying Vitor, but because I refused to let anyone see this as anything less than a triumph. "You're micromanaging the florist again," Isabella said, pulling the tablet from my hands as we sat in my new office, the one Vitor had created for me in the Caruso building. It was larger than my previous space, with better views and technology that made my father's setup look positively ancient. "The centerpieces matter," I argued. "Every detail of this wedding sends a message." "And what message is that? That Brielle Moretti Caruso is in control of everything, including the flowers?" "Exactly." I took back the tablet. "If I'm going to be paraded around as the new power couple's female half, I'm going to ensure everyone sees exactly what that means." Isabella sighed. "You know, at some point you might want to consider whether you're planning a wedding or a corporate merger. Why can't it be both?" In truth, the line between marriage and business arrangement had blurred completely. Vitor and I met daily to review operations, coordinate strategy, and plan the integration of our family's enterprises. We were polite, professional, and occasionally even friendly when the topic turned to shared interests like financial structures or market expansion. What we weren't was romantic. Oh, we performed romance beautifully for public consumption. Vitor held my hand at family dinners. I smiled adoringly at him during business meetings with allied families. We'd mastered the art of looking like a couple deeply in love while maintaining careful emotional distance in private. It was easier that way. Safer. "He's been asking about your preferences," Isabella said, pulling up another file. "Living arrangements after the wedding. He wants to know if you want to maintain your apartment or move into the estate full-time." The question had been hanging between us for weeks. My apartment was my sanctuary. Small, carefully decorated with things I'd chosen, paid for with money I'd earned. Moving into the Caruso estate meant giving up that independence, that piece of myself that wasn't tied to family obligations. But it also meant embracing my new role fully. No half measures. The estate, I decided. But I want my own office there. And my own space. We can share the master suite for appearances, but I need somewhere that's just mine. I'll let him know. Isabella hesitated. "Brielle, can I ask you something personal? When have you ever asked permission before?" She smiled slightly. "Fair point. Do you actually want this marriage? Or are you just making the best of an impossible situation?" I considered the question carefully. A month ago, the answer would have been simple. I was trapped, playing a role I hadn't chosen. But now, After weeks of working alongside Vitor, of seeing how he valued my input and challenged my ideas, of discovering that Bruno hadn't been entirely a fiction. I want the partnership, I said finally. Whether that's the same as wanting the marriage, I honestly don't know. The wedding itself was a spectacle. 500 guests packed into the same church where 3 generations of Carusos had been married, with flowers and music, and enough security to suggest we were marrying in a war zone rather than a house of worship. I walked down the aisle alone. My father had offered his arm, but I'd declined. This marriage wasn't his gift to give. It was my choice, complicated and strategic as it was. Vitor waited at the altar in a custom tuxedo that probably cost more than most people's cars, his expression unreadable as I approached. But when I reached him, when our eyes met, I saw something flicker in those gray depths. Not love, perhaps, but recognition, respect, the acknowledgement that we were both walking into this with our eyes open. "You're stunning," he murmured as I took his hand. "I know," I replied, making him smile. The ceremony was traditional, Catholic, with all the pomp and ritual our families expected. I spoke my vows clearly, meaning every word of the promises I made. Loyalty, partnership, honor. What I couldn't quite bring myself to promise was love. But when the priest pronounced us husband and wife, when Vitor kissed me with surprising gentleness given the performance we were putting on, I felt something shift. This wasn't Bruno kissing Ella anymore. This was Vitor Caruso claiming his wife, and Brielle Moretti accepting that claim. The reception was held at the Caruso estate, transformed into something out of a fairy tale with lights and flowers and enough champagne to float a small boat. We danced our first dance, a song Vitor had chosen without consulting me, but one that somehow perfectly captured the strange space between romance and arrangement we inhabited. "Any regrets?" he asked as we moved across the floor, hundreds of eyes watching us. "About the wedding or the marriage?" "Either. Both." I considered the question as we turned, my hand in his, our bodies moving together with a coordination we'd developed through weeks of strategy meetings and shared goals. "No regrets. But Vitor, this doesn't mean I'm going to be an easy wife." His laugh was low and genuine. Thank God. I'd be bored with easy. We circulated through the crowd, accepting congratulations and navigating the complex politics of our newly merged families. Some congratulated us with genuine warmth, others with barely concealed calculation, already wondering how to exploit this new power structure. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. "Your father is watching," Vitor murmured during a rare moment alone. I glanced across the room to where Domenico Moretti stood with Antonio Caruso, both men surveying the crowd like generals assessing a battlefield. "He's probably taking credit for this entire arrangement. Let him. We know the truth." Vitor's hand settled on my waist, possessive but not controlling. This marriage might have been their idea, but what we build from it will be entirely ours. Promise? Promise. The evening continued until finally, mercifully, we could make our exit. No honeymoon. We both had too much work to do integrating our operations. Instead, we'd spend our first night as husband and wife in the master suite of the Caruso estate. My things had been moved during the reception, integrated into the massive bedroom that now belonged to both of us. But true to his word, Vitor had also prepared an adjoining suite, smaller but still elegant, with a sitting room and office space that was entirely mine. "Your sanctuary," he said, opening the door to show me. "When you need space, when you need to think without me hovering, this is yours. I won't enter without permission." The gesture was unexpected and surprisingly touching. "Thank you." He moved closer, and I was suddenly very aware that we were alone, that this was our wedding night, that despite all the strategic conversations we'd had about our arrangement, we hadn't discussed this part. "Brielle," he said quietly, I'm not going to pressure you for anything you're not ready to give. This marriage is real legally, politically, strategically. But the rest, the intimacy, the romance, that happens on your timeline. And if I'm never ready, then we have the best strategic partnership in the history of organized crime in separate bedrooms. He smiled slightly. I can live with that. I should have felt relieved, should have been grateful for his understanding. Instead, I felt something else, something that made me close the distance between us, made me reach up to loosen his bow tie with hands that trembled slightly. Brielle, he started. I'm choosing this, I interrupted. Not because it's expected or required, but because I want to. Is that acceptable, Mr. Caruso? His eyes darkened. More than acceptable, Mrs. Caruso. The name sent a thrill through me. Not because I'd lost my identity, but because I'd claimed a new one. I wasn't just Brielle Moretti anymore. I was Brielle Moretti Caruso. And that meant something. What followed was nothing like the gentle romance of our Bruno and Ella days. This was claiming and being claimed. Acknowledgement that we were equals in every way that mattered. When Vitor touched me, it was with reverence and possession combined. When I responded, it was with the understanding that I was choosing this, choosing him, choosing us. Afterward, as we lay tangled in sheets that cost more than most people's monthly rent, he traced patterns on my shoulder with lazy fingers. No regrets? He asked again. None, I said, and realized I meant it. Though if you tell anyone I admitted that, I'll deny it. He laughed. Noted. Your reputation as the difficult wife remains intact. Good. I turned to face him. Speaking of which, we need to discuss the integration timeline for the financial operations. I have ideas about restructuring the shell companies that... Brielle. What? It's our wedding night. Can we discuss shell companies tomorrow? I considered this. I suppose. Though you should know that I function best with clear organizational structures and defined timelines. I'll keep that in mind. He pulled me closer. For now, though, can we just be two people who married today? Not strategists or partners or power players. Just Vitor and Brielle. The request was so simple, so human, that I found myself nodding. Okay, just for tonight. Just for tonight, he agreed. But as I drifted toward sleep, secure in his arms and in my own power, I realized that the line between strategy and something deeper had already blurred. I'd married Vitor Caruso to save my place in my family's empire. But somewhere along the way, I'd started to actually want him. Not as a means to an end, but as an end himself. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. And for the first time since my father had announced this engagement, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, this arranged marriage might become something real. The first month of marriage settled into a rhythm that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. Vitor and I ran our combined operations with brutal efficiency, identifying redundancies and exploiting opportunities neither family alone could have accessed. Profit margins increased. Federal heat decreased. Our reputation as an unstoppable partnership spread through the eastern territories like wildfire. The Castellano family is asking for a meeting, I told Vitor one morning over breakfast in our private dining room. We'd fallen into the habit of reviewing the day's priorities over coffee and whatever elaborate meal our chef had prepared. They want to discuss territorial agreements in Jersey. They're testing us, Vitor replied, scanning the proposal I'd pulled up on my tablet. Seeing if the new Mrs. Caruso actually has the authority she claims, or if she's just window dressing. Then I'll handle the meeting alone. He looked up sharply. Brielle, if they're testing me, sending you along defeats the purpose. I need to establish my own authority, separate from yours. I met his gaze steadily. Besides, I've negotiated with the Castellanos before. Marco owes me a favor from the East River smuggling routes I restructured last year. Something flickered in his eyes. Concern, perhaps, but also that now familiar respect. Take Santoro and his team. I want security. Obviously, I made a note. And I'll record everything for legal backup. Not for legal backup, he corrected. Because I trust your judgment, but I want to know if they try to undermine you. The distinction mattered. He wasn't trying to monitor me. He was making sure I had the evidence I needed if anyone challenged my authority later. I love you, I said, then froze. The words had slipped out so naturally I hadn't even thought about them. But now they hung in the air between us, weighted with significance neither of us had been ready to acknowledge. Vitor set down his coffee carefully. What did you say? I scrambled for a retraction, but he was already moving, crossing to my side of the table. Say it again, he demanded, his voice rough. I said I love you. This time it was deliberate, a choice. I don't know when it happened. Maybe it started with Bruno, or maybe it started when you burned my blackmail file, or maybe it was when you gave me my own sanctuary. But it's true, Vitor. I love you. And he kissed me like a man starving, like I was air and water and everything necessary for survival. When we finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. I loved you as Bruno, he said quietly. And I love you even more as Brielle. You're everything I never knew I needed. Partner, challenger, equal. My queen in every sense of the word. The admission should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like vulnerability. Like we'd both finally lowered our defenses and exposed our hearts. This doesn't mean I'm going to be easier to work with, I warned. He laughed. I'd be disappointed if you were. The meeting with the Castellanos went exactly as I'd predicted. Marco Castellano started with subtle condescension, assuming I was a messenger for my husband rather than a decision-maker. 20 minutes and one brutal dissection of his proposed terms later, he was treating me with wary respect. You drive a hard bargain, Mrs. Caruso, he said, reviewing the contract modifications I'd demanded. I drive a fair bargain, I corrected. You want access to our shipping routes in exchange for your distribution network, but the terms you proposed heavily favored your family. My revisions create actual parity. And if we refuse? Then you continue operating without access to our ports, and we continue building our own distribution network. It'll take longer, but we have the resources. I smiled pleasantly. Your choice, Marco. He studied me for a long moment. You're nothing like your father. No, I agreed. I'm better. The contract was signed within the hour. When I returned to the estate, Vitor was in his study reviewing security reports. He looked up as I entered, tension I hadn't noticed releasing from his shoulders. How did it go? We now control 40% of Jersey distribution. I dropped the signed contracts on his desk. And Marco Castellano knows never to underestimate me again. Vitor's smile was fierce with pride. Tell me everything. We spent the next hour reviewing the negotiation point by point, him asking strategic questions that sharpened my thinking, me explaining the leverage I'd used and the concessions I'd gained. It was better than sex. This meeting of minds, this partnership that went beyond physical attraction to something deeper. Almost better than sex, anyway. We should celebrate, Vitor said finally, standing and pulling me close. You just secured one of the most significant territorial agreements in a decade. It was a good day's work, I agreed, already thinking about the next challenge. Though we still need to address the situation in Baltimore. The Romano family is... Brielle. What? Stop strategizing for 5 minutes and let me be proud of my wife. The word wife no longer felt like a chain. It felt like an identity I'd claimed, one that amplified rather than diminished who I was. Okay, I said, winding my arms around his neck. 5 minutes. He kissed me thoroughly, then pulled back with a slight smile. Also, I have something for you. He retrieved a folder from his desk, Not business documents this time, but architectural plans. What is this? The old Moretti warehouse on the waterfront. Your father sold it to me as part of the merger. He pointed to the renderings. I'm converting it into headquarters for you. Offices for your team, secure server rooms, even a conference center for the kinds of negotiations you prefer to handle yourself. I stared at the plans, emotion tightening my throat. Vitor, this is recognition that you're not just my partner, you're a power in your own right. You need your own base of operations, your own team, your own empire within our empire. He watched my reaction carefully. If you don't like it, we can change anything. But I kissed him to shut him up, pouring all my gratitude and love and overwhelming emotion into it. It's perfect, I said when I could speak again. You're perfect. This whole insane arrangement is somehow perfect. Not insane anymore? Still insane. But perfect anyway. The happiness lasted exactly 3 days. Then everything went to hell. I was in my office at the Caruso building, reviewing financial projections for our new Baltimore operations, when Isabella burst in without knocking. We have a problem, she said, her face pale. I immediately pulled up our security feeds, expecting to see federal agents or rival family moves. Instead, I saw my father's car pulling up to the front entrance. He didn't call ahead, I said, alarm bells ringing. Domenico Moretti always announced his visits, always followed protocol. That's not the problem. Isabella pulled up a news feed on my monitor. The headline made my blood run cold. FBI investigation into Moretti Caruso operations. Evidence suggests money laundering network spanning 3 states. I scanned the article rapidly. Anonymous source. Detailed evidence. Suggestion of federal raids imminent. This is wrong, I said immediately. These shell companies don't exist. These transactions never happened. Someone fabricated this. I know. Isabella was already pulling up our actual financial records for comparison. But Brielle, whoever did this had access to your filing systems. They used your organizational structures as the template for the fake evidence. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Someone inside our operation had betrayed us, and they'd done it using my work as the blueprint. My office door opened. Vitor entered, his expression grim. You saw the news, I said. I saw it, and I just got a call from our contact at the bureau. There are 3 teams preparing warrant applications. We have maybe 48 hours before they move. Vitor, I know you didn't. He crossed to me, his hands framing my face. I know you, Brielle. This isn't your work, but someone made it look like it was, which means they're not just trying to bring down our operations. They're trying to destroy you specifically. My father appeared in the doorway. We need to talk. All of us. We convened in Vitor's private conference room. My father, Antonio Caruso, Vitor, and me. The 4 people who controlled the combined empire now facing its greatest threat. The evidence is too detailed to be an outside hack, my father said without preamble. Someone inside did this. Someone with access to Brielle's systems. My systems are secure, I argued. I built in multiple safeguards specifically to prevent. Then someone you trusted bypassed them. Antonio interrupted. The question is who and why now? And how do we respond? Vitor added. If we run, it makes us look guilty. If we stay and fight, we risk federal seizure of all our assets. There's a third option, I said quietly. All eyes turned to me. We find whoever did this and we force them to confess, publicly, before the warrants are executed. You have 48 hours, my father said. Can you find them in that time? I looked at Vitor, at the trust in his eyes despite the chaos swirling around us. Yes, but I'll need resources, and I'll need everyone to stay out of my way. You'll have both, Vitor said immediately. What followed, was the most intense investigation of my life. I pulled in every favor, activated every contact, used every skill I'd developed over years of managing criminal finances. Isabella worked beside me, untangling digital trails and tracking movements through our systems. And 36 hours later, we had our answer. It was Castellano, I told Vitor, my voice hollow with betrayal. Marco Castellano. He planted a mole in my operation 6 months ago, used our meeting last week to finalize the evidence collection, and he's planning to sell the information to the FBI in exchange for immunity for his own operations. Why? Vitor's voice was dangerously quiet. Because you and I together are too powerful. He saw the Jersey deal and realized that if we continue building alliances like that, the Castellanos become irrelevant within 5 years. I pulled up the proof. Digital trails, recorded conversations, evidence that would stand up in any court. He tried to destroy us before we could destroy him. What's our move? My father asked. I looked at Vitor, my partner in every sense of the word. We go to war. The confrontation with Marco Castellano happened in neutral territory, the same hotel where our engagement party had been held. Fitting, somehow, that the place where we'd announced our alliance would be where we proved its strength. Marco sat across from us in a private conference room, flanked by his security team, his expression confident bordering on smug. He thought he'd won, thought he'd destroyed us before we could destroy him. He had no idea what was coming. Vitor, Brielle, he greeted us with false warmth. To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure? Cut the act, Marco, I said, sliding a folder across the table. We know what you did. We have evidence. Every falsified transaction, every planted document, every conversation with your FBI contact. It's all here. His confidence faltered, just slightly. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Vitor's voice was ice. You planted Angela Rossi in Brielle's operation 6 months ago. Used her access to copy Brielle's financial structures. Then you created fake transactions using those structures to make it look like we were running illegal operations we'd never actually conducted. You can't prove that. Actually, I can. I pulled up my tablet, playing a recording of Marco giving instructions to Angela. His own voice, clear and undeniable. This was recorded 3 days ago, along with transcripts of your communications with FBI Special Agent Carson. You were trading information about our operations, real and fabricated, in exchange for immunity for your family. Marco's face had gone pale. You hacked my systems. I protected mine, I corrected. Angela might have been your plant, but I caught her weeks ago. Everything she fed you after that was information I wanted you to have, including evidence of your federal contact. Speaking of which, I pulled up another file. Special Agent Carson is currently being investigated by Internal Affairs for corrupt dealings with organized crime. Your immunity deal? It's worthless. The room was silent except for the quiet hum of my tablet. Here's what's going to happen, Vitor said, his voice carrying absolute authority. You're going to call the FBI. You're going to confess that the evidence was fabricated. You're going to explain that you created it in an attempt to destroy a rival family, and you're going to provide proof that none of the transactions actually occurred. And if I refuse, then we release this. I turned the tablet to show him recordings of his own illegal operations, things we'd compiled over the past 36 hours, things that would put him in federal prison for decades. Your choice, Marco. Confess to falsifying evidence against us, or go down for crimes you actually committed. Marco looked between Vitor and me, and I watched the exact moment he realized he'd lost. That underestimating Brielle Moretti Caruso had been his fatal mistake. You've become quite the power couple, he said bitterly. Yes, I agreed. We have. The confession was made within the hour. Federal warrants against us were withdrawn within 24 hours, and Marco Castellanos' empire began crumbling as word spread that he'd tried to destroy the Moretti-Caruso alliance, and failed spectacularly. You were magnificent, Vidor said that night as we stood in our bedroom. The crisis finally over. We were magnificent, I corrected. This only worked because we approached it as partners. He pulled me close, his hands settling at my waist. I love you, Brielle Moretti Caruso. You know that, right? Not because you're brilliant at strategy or because you saved our empire, but because you're you, fierce and uncompromising and absolutely unwilling to be anything less than extraordinary. I love you too, I said, the words coming easily now. Even though you're possessive and controlling, and you have the annoying habit of being right about most things. Most things. I'm not giving you all things. You're already insufferable enough. He laughed, and I felt the last of my resistance crumble. This marriage that had started as a strategic arrangement, that had evolved through negotiation and compromise and mutual respect, had somehow become real. I have a confession, I said. Oh? I'm not wearing the ugliest dress anymore. His smile was slow and devastating. No. You're wearing power like some women wear diamonds, and it looks spectacular on you. We're going to rule this empire together, I said. Not a question, but a statement of fact. We already do. He kissed me, deep and claiming. Queen Brielle of the Eastern Territories. King Vidor, I replied, my equal partner in crime. Literally and figuratively. The best kind of partnership. Later, as we lay tangled in sheets, planning our next territorial expansion with the same passion most couples brought to vacation planning, I reflected on how far I'd come from that girl who'd worn an ugly dress to sabotage her engagement. I'd tried to make Vidor reject me. Instead, I'd made him see exactly who I was, someone who would fight for her autonomy, who would demand respect, who would settle for nothing less than true partnership. And he'd risen to meet that challenge, had given me not just his name, but real power. Not just partnership in bed, but partnership in empire. What are you thinking? Vidor asked, tracing patterns on my shoulder. That I'm glad I wore that hideous dress. Really? Really. If I'd tried to be the perfect mafia princess, you might have married that woman. Instead, you got me. And I got you. The real you, not the version that plays nice for family politics. I never play nice, he objected. You play nice for me sometimes. That's different. You've earned it. I turned to face him. This man who'd been a stranger, then an enemy, then a partner, and now something deeper than all those things combined. Promise me something, I said. Anything. Promise that we'll always be equals, that you'll never try to diminish me or control me or treat me like anything less than your queen. I promise, he said solemnly, on one condition. What's that? That you promise the same, that you'll never hold back, never soften yourself to make me more comfortable, never be anything less than the magnificent, terrifying, absolutely brilliant woman I married. Deal. We sealed it with a kiss that quickly turned into something more, and as we came together again, as equals and partners and lovers and rulers of an empire built on mutual respect and strategic brilliance, I knew I'd made the right choice. I'd worn my ugliest dress to drive away a fiancé I didn't want. Instead, I'd found a king worthy of a queen, and together we were unstoppable.